The blood-soaked bandage wrapped around Cassidy Turner's shoulder had turned a rusty brown, serving as a grim reminder of the bullet that had torn through her flesh just 2 days prior. The stagecoach robbery outside Alpine, Colorado had left her wounded, alone, and miles from anywhere that resembled civilization in the spring of 1878. Her mare, thankfully, had remained loyal despite the gunfire, allowing her to escape into the rugged wilderness of the San Juan Mountains. Rain began to fall as Cassidy huddled beneath a towering pine, her teeth chattering as fever set in. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat, sending waves of nauseating pain through her entire body. She'd managed to extract the bullet using her hunting knife and a healthy swig of whiskey, but the crude surgery had left her weak and disoriented. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered through her pain-addled mind. "Miss, you all right?" A deep voice cut through the rainfall. Cassidy's hand instinctively moved to the revolver at her hip, but she lacked the strength to draw it. Through hazy vision, she made out the silhouette of a man dismounting from a sturdy buckskin gelding. He approached cautiously, hands visible. "I mean no harm," he said, crouching beside her. His face came into focus, weathered skin, dark beard peppered with gray, and concerned eyes beneath the brim of a worn leather hat. "Name's Nathan Ford. I've got a cabin not far from here." "Leave me be," Cassidy mumbled, trying and failing to shift away from him. Nathan's gaze fell to her bloodied shoulder. "That needs proper tending, miss. Infection's setting in." When he reached toward her, Cassidy flinched. "It hurts too much," she whispered, tears mixing with raindrops on her face. The cowboy nodded solemnly. "That's why I'm here," he said softly. "Let me help you?" Cassidy wanted to refuse, to maintain the independence that had kept her alive these past years, but darkness crowded the edges of her vision. As consciousness slipped away, she felt strong arms lifting her, and for the first time in years, she surrendered to someone else's care. She awoke to the crackling sound of a fire and the scent of pine. Disoriented, Cassidy tried to sit up but fell back with a sharp cry as pain lanced through her shoulder. "Easy there," said Nathan, appearing at her side with a steaming mug. "You've been out for nearly a day." Cassidy's eyes darted around the small cabin, a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn furniture, and shelves lined with supplies. A large bearskin rug covered part of the wooden floor. Through the window, she could see her mare grazing contentedly in a small corral. "My horse." "Fed and watered," Nathan assured her. "Now drink this, it'll help with the fever." She eyed the cup suspiciously. "What is it?" "Willow bark tea with a touch of honey, my mother's remedy." He helped her sit up enough to drink. "I cleaned and redressed your wound." "The bullet path was clean, but infection had started. You're lucky I found you when I did." Cassidy took a cautious sip. The bitter liquid warmed her from within. "Thank you," she said reluctantly, "but I need to be on my way soon." Nathan's eyebrow rose. "With that shoulder?" "You'll be lucky to move around the cabin in a week, let alone ride." "You don't understand. I can't stay here." "Because of whoever put that bullet in you?" Nathan asked, his voice level. When Cassidy's eyes widened, he continued, "Wasn't hard to figure. Bullet wound, woman alone in the wilderness, clearly running from something." Cassidy stared into the fire, weighing her options. "They'll come looking." "Let them," Nathan said simply. "This cabin isn't on any maps, and I know these mountains better than most. Rest now. We'll talk more when you're stronger." Despite her instinct to flee, exhaustion claimed her once more. As she drifted off, Cassidy realized she didn't even know if she could trust this stranger. But for now, she had little choice. Over the next few days, Cassidy's fever broke, and strength slowly returned to her limbs. Nathan proved to be a skilled caretaker, changing her bandages with gentle hands and preparing nourishing meals from his stores, and whatever game he brought back from his traps. He respected her privacy, sleeping on a bedroll near the fire while she occupied his bed. On the fourth morning, Cassidy finally felt strong enough to sit at the small wooden table as Nathan prepared breakfast venison, eggs from the small coop behind the cabin, and pan bread. "Time you told me your name," Nathan said, sliding a plate in front of her. "Unless you prefer I keep calling you miss." She hesitated, then decided truth was fair payment for his care. Cassidy Turner, Nathan nodded. Good to properly meet you, Cassidy Turner. Now, when you're ready, perhaps you might tell me why you've got a bullet hole in your shoulder and fear in your eyes. Cassidy pushed the food around her plate. It's complicated. Most things worth talking about are, he replied, sitting across from her with his own plate. I've got time. She studied him the way he waited patiently, not pushing, just present. There was something about Nathan Ford that felt solid, dependable. Perhaps it was the quiet confidence in his movements or the honest directness in his gaze. I was on the stagecoach from Denver, she began. We were attacked just outside of Alpine. The driver and guard were killed immediately. Nathan's jaw tightened. I heard about that robbery. 3 passengers dead too, they said. 4 others besides me, Cassidy confirmed. I only survived because I was thrown clear when the horses bolted. She touched her wounded shoulder, not completely unscathed though. Why'd you run instead of going to town? Alpine's got a doctor. Cassidy set down her fork. Because the man who led that robbery would have found me there. He's looking for something he believes I have, and do you? Have what he's looking for? Yes, she admitted, though I didn't know its importance when I took it. Nathan studied her face. You're not a common thief, I can tell that much, so why don't you start at the beginning? Cassidy took a deep breath and began her story, surprising herself with how easily the words flowed. She told him about growing up in St. Louis, the daughter of a respected historian and archivist. How after her father's death, she discovered his collection of maps and journals documenting lost Spanish treasure in the Colorado mountains. How she'd come west to follow his research, only to find others on the same trail, including Warren Blackwell, a ruthless businessman who'd murdered her father's research partner. Blackwell doesn't just want the treasure, Cassidy explained. The journals contain land claim information that would give him legal ownership of half the mining operations in Alpine County. He's already wealthy and powerful, but this would make him untouchable. Nathan listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he rose and poured them both coffee. These documents, he asked finally. Where are they now? Hidden, Cassidy said. I buried them before boarding the stagecoach. I was trying to throw Blackwell off my trail. Didn't work too well, Nathan observed. No, she agreed grimly. And now I've put you in danger too. Nathan smiled slightly. Wouldn't be the first time, he sipped his coffee. These mountains have been my home for 15 years. I came here after the war with nothing but nightmares and a need for solitude, found peace instead. His eyes met hers. I won't let a man like Blackwell destroy that peace or harm someone under my protection. I'm not asking for your protection, Cassidy protested. Didn't say you were asking, Nathan replied evenly, but you've got it all the same. That night, as wind howled around the cabin, Cassidy lay awake listening to Nathan's steady breathing from his place by the fire. She couldn't remember the last time someone had offered her help without expecting something in return. The sensation was both comforting and unsettling. She thought of the documents hidden in a waterproof oilskin pouch beneath a distinctive rock formation 3 miles east of town. They represented her last connection to her father, and possibly a new future for herself if she could stay alive long enough to use them. A particularly strong gust rattled the window, and Cassidy pulled the blanket tighter around herself. For the first time in months, despite everything, she felt safe. By the following week, Cassidy could move her injured arm without wincing, though it remained weaker than she would have liked. She insisted on helping around the cabin, learning Nathan's daily routines, chopping wood, tending the small garden, checking traps, and caring for the horses. She found comfort in the simple rhythm of mountain life. Nathan proved to be a man of few words but deep thoughts. In the evenings, he would read from his small collection of books, poetry, philosophy, history, sometimes sharing passages aloud. Cassidy was surprised to discover such a scholarly side to the rugged mountain man. Thoreau, she asked one night, recognizing the volume in his hands. Nathan looked up, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. Man makes good points about living deliberately, Cassidy smiled. My father loved Thoreau, said he had the right idea about society. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. Cassidy's smile faded. He believed knowledge should be free to all, not hoarded by the powerful. That's why Blackwell wanted his research to bury it, not share it. Nathan closed the book. Tell me about these mountains your father studied. Where exactly was this Spanish expedition supposed to have left their treasure? Cassidy hesitated. The journals mention a valley accessible only through a narrow pass. There's a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear and a waterfall that splits around a stone altar. Nathan's eyes widened. I know that place. The local Ute call it the Valley of Echoes. Few white men have ever seen it. You've been there? Cassidy asked, excitement coloring her voice. Once years ago, an old Ute guide showed me when I first settled here, said it was sacred ground. Nathan's face grew serious. If there's Spanish gold there, it's remained hidden for over 200 years for good reason. The valley is almost impossible to find unless you know exactly where to look. That's why the documents are so valuable, Cassidy explained. They don't just point to treasure, they contain the only accurate maps to the valley ever made. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. How many men does Blackwell have? At least 6 that I saw during the stagecoach robbery, probably more in town. And how long before he figures out you're still alive? Cassidy sighed. If he hasn't already, it won't be long. Alpine isn't that big. Someone will have noticed a passenger missing from the reported dead. Then we need a plan, Nathan said. We can't stay here indefinitely, and you can't keep running forever. Cassidy raised an eyebrow. This isn't your fight, Nathan. Maybe not, he agreed. But I've spent too many years watching men like Blackwell take what isn't theirs. Besides, he added with a small smile, I've grown rather accustomed to your company. Cassidy felt warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. I suppose 2 against Blackwell's men is better odds than 1. That's the spirit, Nathan said, reaching for a map rolled up on a nearby shelf. Now, show me where you hid those documents. As April turned to May, the mountain snows began to recede, and wildflowers dotted the meadows surrounding Nathan's cabin. Cassidy's shoulder had healed enough for her to practice shooting again, a skill Nathan insisted she sharpen if they were to confront Blackwell. Your aim's improving, Nathan commented as Cassidy hit 4 of 5 cans arranged on a fallen log. They stood in a small clearing far enough from the cabin that the gunshots wouldn't bring unwanted attention. Still not good enough, she said, frustration evident in her voice as she reloaded the revolver, a Colt Navy model that had belonged to her father. Blackwell's men are killers. So am I when necessary, Nathan said quietly. Something in his tone made Cassidy look at him sharply. 3 years with the 10th Cavalry taught me that much. You fought with the Buffalo Soldiers? Cassidy asked, surprised. Nathan nodded. Enlisted in '65, right after the war ended. Wasn't many units would take a half Cherokee horseman, but the 10th didn't much care about a man's background, only his skill. Cassidy realized how little she actually knew about the man who had saved her life. Is that why you came to these mountains, after your service? Partly. Nathan's eyes grew distant. Lost too many good men to arrows and bullets, needed somewhere quiet to put those ghosts to rest. He shook off the memory. Try again, but this time breathe out as you squeeze the trigger. Cassidy followed his instruction, and all 5 cans went flying. She turned to him with a triumphant smile, only to find him already looking at her with an expression that made her heart skip. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Just thinking you're nothing like I expected when I found you half dead under that pine tree, he said. Is that good or bad? Good, Nathan said simply. Very good. That evening, they finalized their plan over a dinner of rabbit stew. They would retrieve the hidden documents under cover of darkness, then make their way to the Valley of Echoes. If they could find proof of the Spanish expedition and the legal land claims, they could take it directly to the territorial judge in Denver, bypassing Blackwell's influence in Alpine. The spring runoff will make the river crossing dangerous, Nathan warned. And there's still snow in the high passes. We don't have much choice, Cassidy replied. The longer we wait, the more likely Blackwell is to find either us or the documents. Nathan nodded, his expression grave. We'll need supplies for at least 2 weeks. I'll start packing tomorrow. As Cassidy helped clear away their meal, her hand accidentally brushed against Nathan's. The simple contact sent an unexpected jolt through her body. She glanced up to find him watching her, his eyes reflecting the same awareness that had sparked between them. For a moment, neither moved. Then Nathan gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender against her cheek. "Cassidy," he said, his voice rough. A sudden noise outside the cabin froze them both. Nathan immediately reached for his rifle, motioning for Cassidy to move away from the window. They listened in tense silence as footsteps circled the cabin, accompanied by the soft nickering of a horse. "Ford, you in there?" a voice called. "It's Marshal Riley from Alpine." Nathan and Cassidy exchanged alarmed glances. "Stay out of sight," Nathan whispered, moving toward the door. To the marshal, he called, "Coming." "Just a moment." Cassidy retreated to the shadowy corner farthest from the door, her heart hammering. She drew her revolver, prepared for the worst as Nathan opened the door just wide enough to reveal himself. "Evening, Marshal. Wasn't expecting visitors this far up the mountain." "Sorry to intrude, Ford," came the reply. "I'm tracking some men who have been causing trouble." "Thought you might have seen something." "Been keeping to myself as usual," Nathan said casually. "What kind of trouble?" "Stagecoach robbery 2 weeks back, nasty business. All passengers reported dead, but we only found 4 bodies. 5th passenger is missing, a woman." "That's so." Nathan's voice betrayed nothing. "You think she survived, or her body was taken? Either way, I need to know. The woman was carrying documents of considerable value to some powerful people in town." "Sounds complicated," Nathan observed. "Haven't seen any strangers up this way, though." "Sorry I can't be more help." There was a pause. "Mind if I water my horse at your stream? Been riding since dawn." "Help yourself," Nathan said. "I'd invite you in, but the place is a mess. Wasn't expecting company." "No matter," the marshal replied. "I should get back before dark anyway." "Just keep an eye out, would you? If you see anything suspicious, ride into town. There's a reward for information." "I'll do that," Nathan promised. Cassidy remained motionless until she heard the marshal's horse depart, hoofbeats fading into the distance. Only then did she lower her weapon, her hands trembling slightly. "He's working for Blackwell," she whispered as Nathan secured the door. "The marshal is supposed to uphold the law, not help criminals." "Money buys loyalty in places like Alpine," Nathan said grimly. "And it means we need to move faster than planned. The marshal may believe me, or he may circle back to check on my story. Either way, we should be gone by morning." They worked through the night, gathering supplies and preparing the horses. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky, they were ready to depart. Nathan took one last look around the cabin that had been his sanctuary for so many years. "Will you miss it?" Cassidy asked softly. "It's just a place," Nathan replied, though his eyes said otherwise. "Home is where you make it." He adjusted the saddle on his buckskin gelding. "Ready?" Cassidy nodded, mounting her mare. "Ready." They rode east as the sun rose, keeping to game trails and hidden paths that Nathan knew by heart. By midday, they had covered nearly 15 miles, approaching the outcropping where Cassidy had hidden the precious documents. There, she pointed to a distinctive rock formation shaped like a crouching cougar, under the northern edge. They dismounted, and Cassidy quickly located the loose stones hiding her cache. The oilskin packet was untouched, exactly as she had left it. She pulled it out, checking that the contents remained dry and intact: her father's journal, the Spanish maps, and the land claim documents that could bring Blackwell's empire crashing down. "We should keep moving," Nathan advised, scanning the horizon. "There's a place we can camp about 3 hours from here, good defensible position with water nearby." They continued through the afternoon, climbing steadily higher into the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, with narrow trails winding between towering pines and alongside precipitous drops. Cassidy marveled at Nathan's confidence as he navigated the wilderness, reading the landscape like others might read a book. As promised, before dusk, they reached a small plateau nestled between 2 ridges. A clear spring bubbled from the rocks, feeding a small pool before continuing down the mountainside. Nathan helped Cassidy dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "This is beautiful," Cassidy said, taking in the panoramic view of the valley below and the snow-capped peaks rising in the distance. "One of my favorite spots," Nathan admitted. "I come here sometimes when even the cabin feels too confining." They made camp efficiently, working together as if they'd been doing so for years rather than days. After a meal of jerky and hard tack, they sat beside the small fire, the documents spread between them. "Your father's handwriting is meticulous," Nathan observed, carefully turning the pages of the journal. "These calculations for finding the valley entrance are remarkably precise." "He was a scholar before anything else," Cassidy said with pride. "These were his life's work." "He spent 20 years researching the Spanish expeditions." Nathan traced a finger along one of the maps. "According to this, we're here," he indicated their position, "and the valley entrance is approximately 2 days' ride northwest through Black Hawk Pass." "Is that the best route?" Cassidy asked. "No," Nathan shook his head. "Black Hawk would be the obvious choice, too obvious if Blackwell's men are searching. There's another way, longer but safer, an old Ute hunting trail that follows the western ridge. Few white men know of it." As they discussed their route, the temperature dropped with the setting sun. Cassidy shivered, and Nathan wordlessly draped his coat around her shoulders. The gesture was simple but intimate, and when their eyes met over the dancing flames, the conversation from the cabin interrupted by the marshal's arrival seemed to resume without words. "Thank you," Cassidy said softly, "not just for the coat, but for everything. You've risked your life for a stranger's cause." "You're hardly a stranger anymore, Cassidy Turner," Nathan replied, his voice low. "In fact, I feel like I've known you much longer than 2 weeks." "I feel that too," she admitted. "It's unsettling," Nathan smiled slightly. "Unsettling. I've been alone since my father died, relying only on myself." Cassidy pulled the coat tighter. "Trusting someone else doesn't come easily." "Trust is earned, not given," Nathan said. "I hope I've earned some of yours, more than some," Cassidy replied honestly. "I wouldn't be here otherwise." Nathan's gaze was steady, reflecting the firelight. "When this is over, when Blackwell is finished, what then? Will you return to St. Louis?" The question caught Cassidy off guard. She hadn't thought beyond surviving and bringing Blackwell to justice. "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "There's nothing for me in St. Louis anymore, no family, no home." "And if there were somewhere else?" Nathan asked carefully. "Someone else," Cassidy's heart quickened. "Are you offering alternatives, Mr. Ford?" "Perhaps I am, Miss Turner." His voice was gentle, almost tentative, so different from his usual confidence. "I've grown accustomed to solitude, but these past weeks have reminded me what it's like to have someone to share the days with, someone who sees the beauty in these mountains the way I do." Before Cassidy could respond, a distant sound caught Nathan's attention. He held up a hand for silence, his body instantly alert. Rising slowly, he moved to the edge of their campsite, peering into the gathering darkness. "What is it?" Cassidy whispered, reaching for her revolver. "Horses." "At least 3, maybe more," Nathan replied grimly. "Coming up the eastern trail, the marshal and others, they must have tracked us from the cabin." Nathan quickly began gathering their supplies. "We need to move. Now." They doused the fire and packed with practiced efficiency, working in near darkness. Within minutes, they were mounted and moving along a narrow trail that climbed steeply up the western ridge. Nathan led the way, his buckskin gelding picking a sure path despite the limited visibility. "Stay close," he called softly over his shoulder. "The trail narrows ahead." They rode in tense silence, the sound of pursuit growing fainter as they climbed higher into the mountains. The moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape and making their progress easier, but also potentially making them more visible to their pursuers. After an hour of hard riding, Nathan halted at a vantage point overlooking their back trail. Far below, they could see the pinpricks of torchlight as their pursuers searched the base of the ridge. "They've lost our trail," Nathan observed, "but they'll find it again come daylight." "Where are we headed?" Cassidy asked, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. "There's a place about 5 miles ahead, an old trapper's cabin near the timber line. We can rest there until dawn, then continue to the Ute Trail." Nathan studied her face in the moonlight. "How's your shoulder holding up?" "Sore, but manageable," Cassidy answered, rotating the joint carefully. "I won't slow us down." Nathan nodded approvingly. "You're tougher than most men I've known, Cassidy Turner." "Necessity," she replied with a small smile, "but I'll take the compliment." They continued through the night, the trail becoming increasingly treacherous as they climbed. Cassidy's exhaustion grew, but she refused to complain, drawing strength from Nathan's steady presence ahead of her. Just when she thought she couldn't stay in the saddle a moment longer, they rounded a bend, and the small cabin came into view, little more than a lean-to built against a rock face, but shelter nonetheless. "We'll be safe here for a few hours," Nathan said, helping Cassidy dismount. Her legs nearly buckled as they touched the ground, and he caught her against his chest. For a moment they stood together, her face tilted up to his, their breath mingling in the cold air. "Cassidy," Nathan murmured, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. The desire to close the distance between them was overwhelming, but exhaustion and the knowledge of pursuers close behind held Cassidy back. "We should rest," she whispered reluctantly. "While we can." Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll tend the horses," he said, stepping back. "You get inside." The cabin was primitive, but offered protection from the elements. A small stone fireplace occupied one wall, and a rough wooden platform served as a bed. Cassidy unrolled their bedding while Nathan secured the horses in a natural enclosure formed by rocks behind the cabin. When he returned, Cassidy had managed to start a small fire. The warmth was welcome after hours in the biting mountain air. Nathan added a few more sticks, then sat beside her on the bedroll. "We should reach the Ute Trail by midday tomorrow," he said, rubbing his hands together for warmth. "From there, it's another day and a half to the Valley of Echoes. And Blackwell's men, if we're lucky, they'll continue searching the lower trails. Few white men would attempt the route we're taking." Cassidy nodded, fatigue making her eyelids heavy. "We should sleep in shifts," she suggested. "In case they find this place." "I'll take first watch," Nathan insisted. "You need rest more than I do." Too exhausted to argue, Cassidy lay down, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. As sleep claimed her, she felt Nathan's hand gently stroking her hair, a gesture so tender it followed her into dreams. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through cracks in the cabin walls. Nathan sat by the door, rifle across his knees, his profile etched against the growing light. He must have sensed her waking, for he turned, a tired smile crossing his features. "Morning," he said softly. "No sign of pursuit." Cassidy sat up, wincing as stiff muscles protested. "You should have woken me for my watch." "You needed the sleep," Nathan replied simply. "How's the shoulder?" She rotated it carefully. "Better than yesterday." They ate a cold breakfast, not risking a fire in daylight, then prepared to continue their journey. As they led the horses from their shelter, Cassidy paused to take in the breathtaking view. From this height, they could see for miles forests stretching green and endless below them, snow-capped peaks rising majestically in the distance, and the tiny ribbon of a river winding through the valley far below. "It's like looking at the world from heaven," she breathed. "Worth protecting, isn't it?" Nathan said, coming to stand beside her. "From men like Blackwell who see only profit, not beauty." "Yes," Cassidy agreed. "My father would have loved this view. He always said the true treasure of these mountains wasn't gold or silver, but their untamed spirit." "Your father was right," Nathan said. "Though a little gold wouldn't hurt our cause," he added with a wink. The day's journey proved even more challenging than the previous night's ride. The trail where one existed at all wound along precarious ledges and through dense stands of pine and aspen. Several times they had to dismount and lead the horses across particularly treacherous stretches. By midday, as Nathan had predicted, they reached the Ute Trail, a narrow but well-defined path that followed a natural contour along the western face of the mountains. Ancient pictographs occasionally marked the stone walls beside them, silent testimony to the generations who had traveled this route before. "We'll make better time now," Nathan said encouragingly. "The trail is good all the way to the valley approach." They stopped briefly to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky and dried fruit. As they prepared to continue, Nathan suddenly tensed, his head turning sharply toward the path behind them. "What is it?" Cassidy asked, instantly alert. "Listen," Nathan whispered. At first, Cassidy heard nothing but the mountain wind and the call of a distant hawk. Then it came the faint sound of stones clattering down a slope, disturbed by something large or someone. "How?" she whispered. "How could they have found this trail?" the marshal, Nathan muttered grimly. "He must know these mountains better than I gave him credit for." He quickly secured their packs. "We need to keep moving. There's a place ahead where the trail splits. We can try to lose them there." They mounted and continued at a faster pace, the horses sensing their riders' urgency. The trail curved around the mountain face, sometimes widening enough for them to ride side by side, other times narrowing until they were forced to proceed in single file. As they rounded a bend, Cassidy gasped. The path ahead had collapsed in a recent landslide, leaving a gap of nearly 15 feet with a sheer drop of hundreds of feet below. "End of the line," she said, dismay evident in her voice. Nathan studied the obstacle, his expression calculating. "Not necessarily," he said finally. "The horses can jump it." Cassidy stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible." "Not for a good mountain horse," Nathan insisted. "Both of these animals have made similar jumps before. The landing is solid. See how the trail widens on the other side." Cassidy looked where he indicated, unconvinced. "And if they miss?" "They won't," Nathan said with quiet confidence. "But we need to decide now. I can hear our pursuers getting closer." Heart pounding, Cassidy nodded. "You go first. Show me it can be done." Nathan backed his buckskin several yards down the trail, then spurred the horse forward. The gelding seemed to understand what was required, gathering itself and launching into the air with powerful legs. For a heart-stopping moment, horse and rider hung suspended over the abyss. Then they landed safely on the other side, the buckskin's hooves finding purchase on the rocky trail. "See," Nathan called. "Nothing to it. Your mare can make it easily. She's lighter than my gelding." Cassidy took a deep breath, backing her horse as Nathan had done. "Come on, girl," she murmured to the mare. "We can do this." She urged the horse forward, feeling the powerful muscles bunch beneath her as the mare gauged the distance. Then they were airborne, the wind rushing past Cassidy's face as they soared over the gap. The landing was jarring but solid, the mare's front hooves finding the trail, followed by her hind legs scrambling for purchase. Cassidy leaned forward, helping the horse balance, and then they were safely across. "I knew you could do it," Nathan said, pride evident in his voice. "Both of you." Cassidy's triumphant smile faded as she heard voices behind them. "They're getting closer. Let's go," Nathan urged. "That jump will slow them down, but it won't stop determined men." They rode hard through the afternoon, the trail gradually descending as it wound around the mountain. By late afternoon, they entered a dense forest of ancient pines, the path barely visible beneath centuries of fallen needles. "We're close to the valley now," Nathan said as they paused to water the horses at a small stream. "The entrance is less than an hour ahead, a narrow passage between two stone columns." "Will Blackwell's men be able to follow us there?" "Not easily," Nathan replied. "The approach is well hidden, and I plan to cover our tracks for the last mile." As they continued, Nathan proved true to his word, occasionally dismounting to brush away their tracks or create false trails leading away from their true path. The forest grew denser, the light fading as the sun lowered behind the western peaks. Finally, as twilight settled over the mountains, they reached a seemingly impenetrable wall of rock. Nathan dismounted, leading his horse toward what appeared to be merely a shadow between two towering stone pillars. Cassidy followed, marveling as the shadow revealed itself to be a narrow passage, barely wide enough for a horse and rider to pass through single file. "The Valley of Echoes," Nathan said quietly. "Once we're inside, we'll be safe for the night at least. The passage is easy to defend if they do find it." The passage twisted for nearly 100 yards, sometimes so narrow that Cassidy's knees brushed the rock walls on either side. Then, suddenly, it opened out and Cassidy found herself staring at a vista that took her breath away. A valley stretched before them, perhaps 3 miles long and 1 mile wide, enclosed completely by sheer mountain walls. A waterfall cascaded down the far cliff face, splitting around a flat stone shelf before rejoining in a clear pool below. Meadows of wildflowers covered the valley floor, their colors muted in the fading light. And there, on a rise near the center of the valley, stood the unmistakable silhouette of a stone bear, its form weathered by centuries of mountain storms but still recognizable. "It's real," Cassidy whispered. "Everything in my father's journals, it's all real." Nathan nodded. "The Ute consider this place sacred. They say the spirits of the mountains dwell here, and any sound made in the valley echoes until the spirits answer." As if to prove his point, he let out a sharp whistle. The sound bounced from the encircling cliffs, returning again and again until it seemed the air was filled with answering calls. They made camp near the entrance to the valley, positioning themselves where they could watch the passage while remaining hidden among a stand of pines. After caring for the horses, they shared a meal of the last of their provisions. "Tomorrow we'll search for the Spanish cache," Nathan said, spreading the journal open between them. "According to your father's notes, it should be near the stone bear in a cave marked with a cross." Cassidy nodded, excitement mingling with exhaustion. They were so close to completing her father's work, to finding the evidence that would bring Warren Blackwell to justice. As night fell completely, the temperature dropped dramatically. Without a fire to avoid alerting any pursuers, they huddled together for warmth, wrapped in their blankets beneath the shelter of a low-hanging pine. "Cold?" Nathan asked as Cassidy shivered against him. "A little," she admitted, "but I've endured worse." Nathan's arm tightened around her shoulders, drawing her closer to his warmth. "You never finished telling me," he said softly, "about what happens after all this." Cassidy was quiet for a long moment. "I've been focused on surviving for so long, I haven't let myself think beyond that," she finally said. "What about you? Will you return to your cabin?" "I could," Nathan replied thoughtfully. "Rebuild what life I had there, but it occurs to me that perhaps there's more to living than mere survival." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Perhaps there's room for something else, someone else." Cassidy turned in his arms until she was facing him, their faces close in the darkness. "Nathan Ford," she whispered, "are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," he said carefully, "that when I found you under that pine tree, I wasn't just saving your life. You might have been saving mine too, from loneliness, from forgetting what it means to care for someone." In the silver moonlight filtering through the pine boughs, Cassidy could see the earnestness in his eyes, the vulnerability that the strong, capable cowboy rarely showed. "I've been running so long," she said softly. "The thought of stopping, of building something permanent, it's terrifying." "All the best things are a little terrifying at first," Nathan replied. "Like jumping a horse across a chasm or trusting someone with your heart." Cassidy smiled at the comparison. "Are you saying I should take a leap of faith, Mr. Ford?" "I'm saying," Nathan murmured, his face drawing closer to hers, "that I'd be there to catch you." Their lips met in the darkness, a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened with weeks of unspoken longing. Cassidy's hands found their way into Nathan's hair, drawing him closer as his arms encircled her completely. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the moment you opened your eyes in my cabin," Nathan confessed. "Even with me half dead and covered in trail dust," Cassidy teased. "Especially then," he grinned. "You looked like a warrior queen." They fell asleep in each other's arms, the night passing without disturbance. Dawn arrived with a chorus of birdsong echoing throughout the valley, waking them to a world washed in golden light. After a quick breakfast of their remaining provisions, they set out toward the stone bear at the center of the valley. As they approached the formation, Cassidy pulled her father's journal from her saddlebag, comparing the sketches within to the landscape around them. "According to this," she said, "the cave should be on the eastern side of the bear, partially hidden by a stand of aspens." They circled the massive stone formation, which rose nearly 30 feet from the valley floor. On the eastern side, just as the journal had described, a grove of aspens shimmered in the morning light, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "There." Cassidy pointed to a dark opening partially concealed by the trees. As they approached, they could see that the entrance was man-made, the stone around it smoothed and shaped, and there, carved into the lintel, was a simple but unmistakable cross, the sign they sought. Nathan drew his revolver. "Stay behind me," he cautioned. "No telling what we might find inside or who." The cave extended perhaps 20 feet into the stone bare, its walls unnaturally smooth. At the back, illuminated by the light filtering through the entrance, stood a small stone altar similar to the one that split the waterfall. Upon it rested a metal chest, green with age but intact, Spanish ironwork, Cassidy breathed, approaching the altar. "Just like my father described." Together, they lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of rotted velvet, lay several leather-bound volumes, their pages yellow with age but preserved by the dry mountain air. Beside them was a small wooden box containing a collection of gold coins bearing the Spanish crown and several uncut gemstones that glittered even in the dim light. "The expedition records," Cassidy said, carefully lifting one of the volumes. "And proof they were here on land that now belongs to the United States government, not Warren Blackwell." Nathan examined one of the coins. "There's enough gold here to make a comfortable start somewhere," he observed, "if that's what you wanted." Cassidy looked up from the ancient text. "What I want," she said deliberately, "is justice for my father, and then—" She smiled at Nathan. "And then perhaps that new beginning you mentioned." They carefully packed the discoveries into their saddlebags, ensuring the fragile documents were well protected. As they emerged from the cave into the bright midday sun, Cassidy felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, the burden of her solitary mission finally shared and nearly completed. "Once we get these to the territorial judge in Denver," she said, "Blackwell's false claims will be invalidated. The land will revert to public ownership or be properly deeded to the miners who have worked it honestly." "And the men who killed your father and attacked the stagecoach?" Nathan asked. "They'll hang," Cassidy said firmly, "as they deserve." They were halfway back to their campsite when the echo of a gunshot reverberated through the valley. Nathan immediately pulled Cassidy behind the cover of a large boulder, drawing his rifle in one fluid motion. "They found the passage," he said grimly. "How many do you think?" Cassidy asked, pulling her revolver. "Hard to say. The echoes make it impossible to tell." Nathan peered cautiously around the rock. "I count at least 4 men approaching from the entrance. One of them is the marshal. And Blackwell?" "Yes, looks like he decided to join the hunt personally." Cassidy's jaw tightened. "Good, I want him to see his plans fail with his own eyes." Nathan gave her an appraising look. "You're not what most would expect from a historian's daughter," he said with admiration. "My mother was a frontier woman before she married my father," Cassidy replied with a small smile. "She taught me more than just book learning." They watched as Blackwell and his men spread out, searching the valley systematically. The men were well armed and moving with the confidence of those who believed their prey was cornered. "We can't let them find the documents," Cassidy said urgently. "Everything my father worked for, everything we've risked our lives for would be lost." Nathan nodded. "There's a path up the western cliff," he said, pointing to what looked like little more than a game trail winding up the steep valley wall. "It leads to a ledge that overlooks the entire valley. One person with a rifle could hold off an army from up there." "You're suggesting we split up," Cassidy stated, understanding immediately. "I'll take the ledge, provide covering fire," Nathan confirmed. "You circle around through that stand of trees and head for the passage. Once you're clear of the valley, ride hard for Denver." Cassidy shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving you behind. It's not forever," Nathan assured her, his hand finding hers. "Just until Blackwell and his men are dealt with, I'll find you in Denver when it's done. And if something happens to you, it won't," he said with quiet confidence. "I've survived worse odds." He pressed the Spanish coins into her hand. "Take these, you might need them on the journey." Cassidy closed her fingers around the coins, then impulsively leaned forward and kissed Nathan fiercely. "This isn't goodbye," she insisted when they parted. "This is I'll see you soon." "I'll see you soon, then," Nathan agreed, his eyes conveying everything his words couldn't. "Wait for my signal before you move." With a final squeeze of her hand, he slipped away, moving with the silent grace of a man long accustomed to mountain stalking. Cassidy watched until he disappeared among the rocks, then turned her attention to planning her own route through the trees to where the horses waited near the valley entrance. Minutes stretched endlessly as she waited, pressed against the boulder, watching Blackwell and his men draw steadily closer in their search pattern. The marshal had separated from the others, moving toward the stone bear dangerously close to discovering the cave and its recently disturbed contents. Then a rifle shot cracked from the western cliff, the sound multiplying in the enclosed valley until it seemed an entire company was firing. The marshal dropped, clutching his leg where Nathan's bullet had found its mark. The other men scattered for cover, returning fire blindly toward the cliff face. Cassidy seized her opportunity, darting from behind the boulder into the cover of the aspen grove. Staying low, she worked her way from tree to tree, heading for the denser pine forest that would provide better concealment for her approach to the valley entrance. Another shot rang out, followed by a cry of pain from one of Blackwell's men. Nathan was picking them off one by one, careful shots designed to wound rather than kill, keeping them pinned down while Cassidy made her escape. She had nearly reached the pines when a voice stopped her cold. "That's far enough, Miss Turner." Warren Blackwell himself stepped from behind a tree, his revolver aimed steadily at Cassidy's chest. He was a tall man with cold eyes and a precisely trimmed beard, dressed more for a business meeting than a mountain manhunt. "Your father was equally troublesome," Blackwell continued conversationally. Never knowing when to give up a losing fight, Cassidy's finger tightened on her revolver's trigger, but Blackwell's gun was already drawn. "My father was right about you," she said, buying time. "A thief hiding behind a businessman's respectability." Blackwell smiled thinly. "Your father was a dreamer who didn't understand progress. These mountains hold wealth that should be developed, not hidden away by sentimental fools." "The land isn't yours to develop," Cassidy retorted. "It never was." "No." Blackwell raised an eyebrow. "I have deeds that say otherwise, deeds that will stand unchallenged once you and your documents are eliminated." "You mean the forged deeds you created after stealing my father's research?" Cassidy's anger gave her courage. "Those won't help you once the territorial judge sees the Spanish expedition records." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Blackwell's face. "So you found them," he said. "Where are they?" "Somewhere you'll never look," Cassidy bluffed. In truth, the precious documents were in her saddlebag, just yards away near the valley entrance. Another rifle shot echoed from the cliff, followed by a shout as another of Blackwell's men fell wounded. Blackwell glanced briefly toward the sound, and Cassidy seized her chance. She dropped and rolled as she'd seen Nathan do during their shooting practice, coming up with her revolver firing. Her first shot went wide, but the second caught Blackwell in the shoulder, spinning him around. His return fire splintered the tree beside Cassidy's head as she scrambled for better cover. "You'll pay for that," Blackwell snarled, advancing despite his wound. Cassidy fired again, but her revolver clicked empty, 5 shots spent and no time to reload. She backed away, searching desperately for some advantage. A sharp whistle cut through the chaos Nathan's signal. Cassidy dove to the side just as a rifle shot cracked from the cliff. Blackwell staggered, a second wound blossoming on his thigh. He fell to one knee but kept his gun trained on Cassidy. "It's over, Blackwell," she said, rising slowly. "Your men are down and there are enough bullets left for you." "It's never over," Blackwell spat. "Men like me don't lose to." His words were cut short as Nathan materialized behind him, the butt of his rifle connecting solidly with Blackwell's head. The businessman crumpled unconscious to the ground. "Men like him talk too much," Nathan observed dryly, quickly binding Blackwell's hands with a length of rawhide. He looked up at Cassidy, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, relief flooding through her. "You were supposed to stay on the cliff." "And leave you to have all the fun," Nathan grinned, though his expression quickly sobered. I couldn't risk it when I saw Blackwell had separated from the others and was heading toward you." They secured Blackwell to a tree, then quickly rounded up his wounded men, the marshal and 2 hired guns, all nursing Nathan's precisely placed shots to arms and legs. None were life-threatening, but all were painful enough to eliminate any thought of further resistance. "What now?" Cassidy asked as they finished tying the last man. "Now we take them and the evidence to Denver," Nathan replied. "It's a 5-day ride, but with these men as prisoners, it might take longer." "You're coming with me then?" Cassidy couldn't keep the hope from her voice. Nathan's expression softened. "All the way to Denver and beyond, if you'll have me." The journey to Denver proved every bit as challenging as Nathan had predicted. With 4 prisoners on horseback, all nursing wounds that required regular attention, their pace was painfully slow. They followed the Ute Trail back to more established routes, keeping a watchful eye for any additional men Blackwell might have in the area. Blackwell himself remained sullenly silent for most of the journey, his cold eyes following Cassidy with undisguised hatred. The marshal, however, proved more talkative as the miles passed, eventually confessing that Blackwell had paid him handsomely to turn a blind eye to the stagecoach robbery and to help track down the missing passenger. "I never signed on for murder, though," he insisted as Nathan changed his bandage one evening. "The robberies were supposed to be bloodless, just taking documents, not lives." "Yet people died," Cassidy said coldly, "including my father's research partner." The marshal had the grace to look ashamed. "Blackwell's men got carried away. By the time I realized how far he was willing to go, I was in too deep to back out." "You'll get your chance to tell that to the judge," Nathan replied without sympathy. "Maybe he'll be more understanding than the families of those who died." On the 8th day, after leaving the Valley of Echoes, the distinctive silhouette of Denver appeared on the horizon, a growing city of nearly 20,000 souls, its buildings a mix of frontier roughness and emerging sophistication. They arrived late in the afternoon, drawing curious stares as they made their way through the streets, 2 trail-worn riders escorting 4 bound and bandaged men. At the territorial courthouse, they were met with initial skepticism that quickly turned to intense interest when Cassidy produced the Spanish documents and explained their significance. Judge Hammond, a stern-faced man with a reputation for incorruptibility, ordered Blackwell and his men held without bail while he examined the evidence. "These records will require careful authentication," the judge told Cassidy, handling the ancient volumes with reverence. "But if they prove genuine, they will indeed invalidate any competing claims to those lands." "They're genuine," Cassidy assured him. "My father devoted his life to verifying the expedition's route and records." "Was your father Professor James Turner of St. Louis University?" the judge asked, surprise evident in his voice. "Yes," Cassidy replied, equally surprised. "Did you know him?" The judge smiled slightly. "We corresponded for several years regarding early Spanish land grants. He was a meticulous scholar and an honest man." His expression hardened as he glanced toward the cells where Blackwell was being held. "If these men had anything to do with his death, they will face the full measure of the law." After providing detailed statements about the stagecoach robbery and Blackwell's other crimes, Cassidy and Nathan found themselves suddenly at loose ends, their mission completed, the future stretching before them uncharted. They secured rooms at a respectable hotel, reveling in the luxury of hot baths and clean clothes after weeks on the trail. That evening, they shared a proper meal in the hotel's dining room, both somewhat uncomfortable in civilized surroundings after so long in the wilderness. "It feels strange," Cassidy admitted, smoothing the borrowed dress she'd purchased that afternoon. "Being in a city again, having this all over." "Not all over," Nathan corrected gently. "Just this part." He reached across the table to take her hand. "There's still the matter of what comes next." Cassidy smiled. "Yes, I suppose there is. I've been thinking," Nathan said, a hint of nervousness in his normally confident manner. "There's good land south of Alpine Fertile Valley, plenty of water, far enough from town to have peace but close enough for convenience." "Are you suggesting farming, Mr. Ford?" Cassidy asked teasingly. "I thought you were a mountain man through and through." "A man can change," Nathan replied with a smile, "or rather expand his horizons." His expression grew more serious. "I'm suggesting a home, Cassidy. A place for both of us, if that's what you want too." Cassidy's heart quickened. "Are you proposing, Nathan Ford?" "Inelegantly, perhaps," he admitted, "but sincerely." "We've known each other less than 2 months," Cassidy pointed out, though her tone held no objection. "And in that time, we've faced death together, trusted each other with our lives, and discovered things about each other that most couples take years to learn," Nathan countered. "I know my own heart, Cassidy Turner. It's yours if you'll have it." Cassidy looked into the eyes of the man who had saved her life, who had risked everything to help her complete her father's work, who had shown her that trust and love were still possible even after so much loss. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will have it, and give you mine in return." They were married 2 weeks later in Denver, after Judge Hammond concluded his examination of the Spanish documents. As Cassidy had hoped, the evidence proved conclusive. Blackwell's land claims were declared fraudulent, and he and his men were bound over for trial on charges of robbery, fraud, and murder. The small ceremony was attended by few, just the judge himself, and a handful of acquaintances they had made during their stay in Denver. But as Nathan slipped a simple gold band onto Cassidy's finger, she felt her father's presence strongly, approving of the strong, honorable man who now stood beside her. With the reward money offered for Blackwell's capture and a portion of the Spanish gold the judge had deemed their rightful discovery, they purchased the valley land Nathan had mentioned, 200 acres of promising countryside nestled between rolling hills and a clear-running stream. Throughout that summer and fall, they built their home with their own hands, a solid cabin larger and more comfortable than Nathan's mountain shelter, but with the same simple elegance. Cassidy planted a garden while Nathan constructed furniture, each of them finding joy in creating a place that was truly theirs. As winter approached, they sat together on the porch of their completed home, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple. Cassidy leaned against Nathan's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her. "Happy?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Beyond what I thought possible," she replied honestly. "There were so many days after my father died when I thought I'd never feel joy again, only purpose and determination. And now," Cassidy smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently over her still flat stomach, "and now I feel hope for the future, our future." Nathan's eyes widened as he understood her meaning. "You're certain?" "As certain as the doctor in Alpine could make me yesterday," she confirmed, her smile growing at the wonder spreading across his face. Nathan gathered her into his arms, his joy too great for words. As he held her close, Cassidy remembered that terrible day beneath the pine tree, wounded and alone, when she had told this then stranger that it hurt too much. "You were right, you know," she murmured against his chest. "About what?" Nathan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "That day you found me, when I said it hurt too much, and you said that's why you were there." Cassidy looked up into the face of the man who had become her whole world. "You were there to help the pain fade, to show me that life could be beautiful again." Nathan's hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness. "And you showed me that solitude isn't the same as peace, that a life shared is a life doubled." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they held each other close, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, no longer alone, no longer running, but building something lasting in this wild country they both loved. 3 years later, on a bright spring morning, Cassidy sat on that same porch, watching Nathan teaching their 2-year-old son James to ride his first pony, a gentle Shetland that barely stood higher than Nathan's knee. The boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard as Nathan led the pony in careful circles. Their home had grown along with their family. A second room had been added for James, and Nathan was already planning another addition for the child. Cassidy carried a daughter. She was certain, though Nathan insisted, they would have another son. The valley had flourished under their care. Fields of wheat and corn stretched behind the house, and a small herd of cattle grazed on the hillside. They had neighbors now, other families drawn to the fertile land, and the community slowly taking shape. Once a month, Nathan still rode into the mountains, returning with game and stories of the wilderness he would never fully leave behind. Sometimes Cassidy accompanied him, leaving James with their neighbor Sarah while they revisited the places that had brought them together, including, occasionally, the Valley of Echoes, which remained their special secret. Alpine had grown too, its fortunes no longer tied to Blackwell's corrupt influence. The mines operated under fair agreements, and prosperity was shared more equally among the town's residents. Judge Hammond had kept his word, ensuring that justice was served not only for Cassidy's father, but for all who had suffered under Blackwell's schemes. As she watched her husband and son, Cassidy felt a contentment that went deeper than happiness, a bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be, with exactly the people she was meant to love. When Nathan returned to the porch, lifting a sleepy James into his arms, his smile held the same certainty. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Ford?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Just how far we've come," Cassidy replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And how glad I am that you found me under that pine tree." "Best tracking I ever did," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Though finding you was the easy part, convincing you to stay that took some doing." Cassidy laughed. "I wasn't that difficult." "You were shot, fevered, and had a gun pointed at my chest within 10 minutes of waking," Nathan reminded her. "I'd call that difficult, cautious," Cassidy corrected with a smile, "and you loved it." "I loved you," Nathan said simply. "From the moment you opened those fierce eyes and told me to leave you be." James stirred in his father's arms, his small face peaceful in sleep. Cassidy reached out to smooth back a lock of the boy's dark hair so like his father's. "And now look at us. A home, a family, a future." "And still an adventure," Nathan added, "just a different kind." As the sun climbed higher in the Colorado sky, they sat together in the life they had built, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had healed each other's wounds, and who had discovered that love, like the mountains themselves, could be both a shelter and a journey, both an ending and a beginning. For Cassidy and Nathan Ford, it was just the beginning.